c'était tout bagage et tout et donc aujourd'hui, c'était.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dmitry Mariasin. I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary of UN Economic Commission for Europe. And it is my great pleasure to be the moderator of today's event. Before we start, I'd like to run through a number of technical details to make sure that we follow a few housekeeping rules. So first of all, asking you to kindly mute the microphone when not speaking, as per the usual Zoom courtesy rules. You are very welcome to use the chat function to post questions, make reflections, and comments. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that simultaneous interpretation is available for this event for English, French, and Russian, and you can select the correspondent channel to tune in and for the interpretation. The session will be recorded for documenting purposes and for later sharing of knowledge and information. We hope this is fine for all of you. And finally, distinguished participants, if you could most kindly use the naming convention in Zoom, which is first the country, the organization, and then first name and last name. And you can do this by hovering over your name in the list of participants and selecting the option rename. With these technical details sorted, I really hope that everyone is seeing us and hearing us well. And it is my great pleasure to give the floor for the welcome remarks to His Excellency Mr. Martin Chungong, the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. Thank you, and good morning from Geneva. I believe we are connected from different time zones, but let me use Geneva. And I recognize the presence of my colleague Amida. Good morning to you and the other members of Parliament who are joining this meeting this morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this very important webinar that we are very pleased to be organizing with the UN Economic Commission for Europe, the ECE, and the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. It is a part of a series of online events we organize yearly since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic to support follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda at the regional level. We are proud to provide these platforms that allow parliamentarians and parliamentary staff to get in contact with experts and peers from other countries in order to exchange respective knowledge, experience, discuss common challenges, and various ways to overcome them. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a critical juncture in human history. According to the United Nations latest report, only 15% of the SDG targets are on track to be achieved. The COVID-19 pandemic and other factors have led to 23 million more people living in extreme poverty and 123 million more suffering from hunger in 2022 compared to 2019. Inequalities persist and have been exacerbated by the climate crisis, which reached unprecedented levels in 2023. Extreme weather events have disproportionately affected the poorest communities. They have increased global food insecurity, hunger, and poverty. Agri-food systems are directly related to this. Wrong choices made at institutional, economic, and commercial levels have contributed to climate change, natural resource degradation, and further inequalities within and among countries. As we speak, Agri-food systems are responsible for a third of the global greenhouse emissions. This means that they directly contribute to worsening the negative impacts on the climate. But agri-food systems are essential to human survival. If transformed in a more effective, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable manner, agri-food systems can accelerate the achievement of the global goals. So now the question is, how can parliaments help make the right decisions to amplify the benefits of agri-food systems for the people and the planet? How can they make sure that these decisions will not affect the costs of production and food prices, thus provoking negative impacts on people in vulnerable situations? This challenging situation calls for the strengthening of national, regional, and global action as a matter of urgency. It calls for a multi-stakeholder, all of society engagement, and within that framework, parliaments have a key responsibility and role to play. With your legislative, oversight, budgetary, and representational powers, you are uniquely positioned to enhance efforts to transform agri-food systems and leverage them to attain the SDGs. You can adopt and revise legislation to effectively support the implementation of SDG targets, for example, on poverty, food security, responsible consumption and production, climate action. You can promote the enhancement of public investments into the agricultural sector, especially in rural areas, and also influence private financing by creating the preconditions for agribusiness investments. You can check if SDG implementation is right on track by overseeing your government's actions, requesting information from relevant ministries, as well as public feedback from constituents. Parliaments need to be at the heart of that effort to ensure that the needs and interests of all, especially those that are in vulnerable situations, are systematically taken into consideration, and that ambitious commitments to implement the SDGs by 2030 are effectively implemented by their governments. Honorable members of Parliament, dear colleagues present in this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, it is my hope that you will use this privileged platform to benefit from the expertise of invited speakers, share your views with your peers, and discuss how you can enhance actions to address the climate crisis, transform agri-food systems, and therefore accelerate the achievement of all SDGs in a balanced, coherent, and integrated manner. I wish you very fruitful and constructive discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for your welcoming remarks. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor for her welcoming remarks to the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Ibu Armida Al-Jabana. Ibu Armida, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, honorable members of Parliament, my good friend, SG of IPU, Martin Chungong, as well as to all dear participants, warm greetings from Bangkok, Thailand. Very good morning, very good afternoon. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar for parliamentarians in Europe as well as Asia Pacific. And the topic of this webinar is very, very strategic, important, as well as timely. As all of you are aware, agri-food systems that are sustainable, equitable, healthy, as well as resilient are very critical to accelerate and to have a successful SDGs, as well as to tackling climate change. But again, we also understand very well that these systems are severely threatened. Many challenges, environmental challenges, natural disasters, water stress, drought, lost biodiversity, and so on, as well as there have been affected by conflicts, financial instability, as well as price increases, yeah, for that matter, such as inflation. Again, I think SG mentioned that food production accounts for almost 30% of greenhouse gas emission, 80% of deforestation, and around 70% of freshwater uses. So each stage of post-food production, ranging from processing to disposal, generates significant greenhouse gas emission as well as other environmental effects. Another issue is on the progress of or in food security and nutrition, unfortunately, has been stagnated, if not reversed yet, especially in some parts of the world, which led to, again, this long-standing challenges of hunger, food insecurity, and many other impact thereon. Another issue, which is quite becoming quite prominent, especially in our region, is undernourishment, which unfortunately, again, the number has risen, yeah, especially the past 3 years. Yet, yeah, despite all these challenges, yet 1/3 of food is lost or wasted. This is, of course, a great concern, considering that smallholders produce 80% of food in our region, as well as in other parts of the world, such as sub-Saharan Africa, many of which live in poverty and will face greater food insecurity with the changing climate patterns. Another also, if I may put this at the front, yeah, which has become a big challenge in our region, is overweight and obesity, which has been on the rise, increasing the risk of diet-related NCD, non-communicable diseases. The number of this overweight, for example, in adults over 18 years and old, also unfortunately has significantly increased over the past decade in our region. The past 10 years, yeah, a marked increase of around 25 to 30% increase. So therefore, yeah, strengthening the resilience of agri-food system is very critical, very urgent, and requires enhanced sectoral coordination at national as well as global levels. And hence, yeah, we come to the role of parliaments, or in this case, parliamentarians. Allow me to highlight 3 key areas for your further consideration. First one is parliamentary engagement as well as multi-sectoral collaboration on agri-food systems are definitely key and absolutely urgent. This can be done by establishing high-level cross-sectoral bodies, enacting legislative framework for better collaboration, and ensuring budgets reflect these multi-sectoral priorities. Parliaments also play a key role in enhancing policy coherence and in integrating food system strategies into national policies for the betterment of rural livelihoods, health, education, trade, employment, as well as climate change. Yeah. Second is that food systems climate action must be strengthened. So climate action based on food system. Parliaments can enact laws to regulate and support agri-food system practices that reduce emission and other environmental impacts. In alignment with the UAE Declaration on Agri-Food System and Climate Action, parliaments can also ensure comprehensive alignment between national food system transformation pathways, national adaptation plans, and nationally determined contributions, among other climate plans. And finally, last but not least, resources are required to strengthen evidence-based action and promote innovation, in which data unavailability is consistently highlighted by national food system conveners as one of the main barriers to agri-food system transformation. In this regard, parliaments can mandate the collection as well as dissemination of data on food security to strengthen monitoring and evaluation, as well as to inform policy decisions, promote public awareness, and ensure targeted support for vulnerable groups of population. So with that, again, thank you very much. And I wish you a fruitful and successful session and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary, for your welcoming remarks, and of course for the great partnership that ECE and ESCAP have been honored to have with IPU. It's a collaborative effort going on for several years now. Distinguished members of parliament, dear colleagues, before we start the substantive part of our event, I'd like to ask you to participate in a short pre-webinar poll with only 2 questions. To do that, you will need to use the Mentimeter platform. You can see on your screen a QR code. Please point your camera to this QR code. And then you'll have the question. You need to tap your answer. And of course, the key questions are, what are your expectations from the webinar? And then if you can rate the following, whether you're familiar with the subject of this webinar, so agri-food systems, I understand why SDGs are directly linked to the subject of the webinar, and I'm excited to learn about this topic. So these are fairly straightforward questions. We hope that you could answer them in a quick poll so that we know your expectations from the event. I suggest we give it a little bit more time because we have some 40 participants online, and so far I think some of them have not yet responded. So encouraging you all to please take your phone out, scan the QR code, and answer the questions, please. Okay, I suggest we still allow colleagues to vote and to select the option they like. But at this point in time, it is very clear that we have a well-informed audience, a very motivated and interested audience that actually would like to learn more specific examples, some practices that are shareable, that are possible to replicate and scale up. And I think we need to proceed and use the opportunity of the excellent panel that we have in this very spirit, make it practical, make it focused on the role of parliaments, and then ultimately identified areas of engagement that could be replicated. With this, distinguished members of parliament, dear colleagues, it's my great pleasure to proceed to the first part of our discussion today, which will focus on securing food for all and based on inclusive, equitable, and healthy agri-food systems. As unfortunately our executive secretary, Ms. Mo-Chan, couldn't join this morning, allow me just to say a couple of words from UNECE perspective before we start. In the UNECE region, which covers 56 countries, and we share 10 of them with UN ESCAP, no target is on track regarding food security and diversity. For us, this is a striking realization. According to the latest SDG progress report that ECE issued in March this year, access to sufficient and nutritious food, for example, is not universal. And we are talking about the region that comprises the European Union countries and many other advanced economies, and yet we are not on track. In half of the countries of the region, the share of adults experiencing moderate or severe food insecurity, it's another SDG 2 indicator, has increased since 2015. So not only are we not on track to achieve the SDG 2 in this region, we're actually going in the wrong direction. And it has increased quite significantly. In 1/3 of the countries, more than 10% of all adults experience food insecurity. And as the Executive Secretary of ESCAP mentioned, undernourishment, unfortunately, it remains an issue, with fewer countries, of course, but still an issue. We need more data, though, to underpin our efforts to inform better policies. And I hope that today, as we hear from the speakers, we will also be able to discuss the role of data in shaping evidence-based policymaking in what concerns agri-food systems. In UNECE, we believe that parliaments can play a critical role in this regard, and I will not repeat what has already been said, just to reiterate the very important point about the fact that policies is not what's written on paper, but rather what is in the budget. Secondly, about the fact that agri-food systems are not really about agriculture. It is a systemic whole of society and whole of government issue that touches upon various aspects of life and directly affects education outcomes and health outcomes, but also depends on the cooperation of so many different sectors of the economy, from transport to education to the government agencies of various kind. And this is why having a holistic whole of government approach to agri-food systems is so important to ensure that we do have food availability for all, and there is equitable access to resources irrespective of income levels in all parts of the society. I'd like to now turn to our panel. We are very pleased to have today experts and practitioners with us who will help us understand this issue in more detail. We have envisaged it as a fairly interactive set of discussions, and it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. First, Ms. Natalia Galat, Senior Technical Officer in charge of SDG coordination in the Office of the Sustainable Development Goals at the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, FAO. Then Ms. Cherry Attilano, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Agrea Agricultural Systems International, and she'll speak about Agrea in more detail when she takes the floor. And then, last but not least, Honorable Member of Parliament from the Seychelles, Mr. Waven William, President of the IPU Standing Committee on Sustainable Development. We will now proceed with our first panel, Securing Food for All. But I'd like to ask all participants to be ready with your questions, comments, reflections, and we will try to make it as interactive as possible. This first part will run until 10:45 or 10:50 or so, and I hope that we can hear from our distinguished panelists their reflections about the following key questions. First, the link between agri-food systems, inequalities, and sustainable development. Second, how can parliaments promote the right to food? This is a very specific question, and please let us know what you think, and let us know in a very direct manner, what do you think parliaments can do and where they can work more effectively on this topic? And then finally, how can parliaments make sure that laws, policies, national plans, strategies, and budgets duly take into consideration the needs of people that are most affected by hunger, malnutrition, and poverty? But also, as we heard from the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, there are other agri-food systems problems, and in some countries it's malnutrition, in some strata of the society it's malnutrition, in others it's obesity. And the world is simultaneously facing a malnutrition and obesity crisis. So perhaps we can also spend a little bit of time on the legislative role and budgetary role, as well as oversight role of parliaments on this very important and growing issue. With this, it's my great pleasure to ask Ms. Natalia Galat to go first, please, to provide your overview from the global perspective from FAO. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Dmitry. Good morning, good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's a true privilege for me to talk to you and to call for certain action to accelerate the agri-food system transformation as the key enabler to advance not only the critical elements of the food security and better nutrition for our populations, but as a positive contributor across all the sustainable development goals. In my short presentation, I would like to focus on 4 things, and I think that within the framed questions that Dmitry proposed, one would be on the right to adequate foods and what is the situation and why it's important and how we can accelerate all the elements. The second is that what we heard already throughout the introductory remarks is the need to have the agri-food systemic approach to all the interventions that would bring all the different sectors, all the different actors, but all of the different players, and to see the issues in their entirety. The third one would be to bring the UN perspective of convening the member states in advancing the food system transformation that started from the UN Food System Summit back in 2021, and the latest last year, the UN Food System Summit stock taking that actually took the progress, how the countries are advancing, what has to be still done. And the last one would be to bring some of the elements of the policy recommendations and taking stock what has happened from the time the 2030 agenda and the SDGs were adopted in the preparation of the high-level political forum that this year will review in depth the SDG 1 on no poverty, SDG 2 on no hunger, and SDG 13 on climate action under the parameters of the global partnership prerequisite for that. So I will start with, and I think that we heard some of the very, very shocking numbers. We still have, as of the date of 2023, more than 700 people that suffer, 700 million people that suffer hunger globally. More than 3.1 billion people that cannot afford healthy diets. But at the same time, we have 4.5 billion globally that depend on agriculture as their source of livelihood. And 80% of the extreme poor live in rural areas. So that all brings together that these people and these communities and these groups, the large numbers, are deprived of their human rights to adequate foods, and therefore advancing the agri-food system transformation will not only be positive for the acceleration of the food security goals, the other SDGs, but also the paramount realization of the right to food aspirations. The second part is in terms of the agri-food system approach, and that's where it's going beyond what Dmitry mentioned. Just looking at the agriculture from the traditional perspective, from the production side, but looking at the entire process from the production, processing, consumption, logistics. So bringing all the different actors that would involve not only the agricultural sector and all the actors initially, but looking at how to bring the different other sectors, health, infrastructure, energy, the labor markets, trade, and of course how it's all connected within the environmental climate change dimensions of the development of the countries. I will use usually a very simple example. We mentioned quite very important statistics in terms of that. Yes, traditionally, for example, the children stunting and malnutrition is decreasing across the countries. But then at the same time, we have the obesity. So the malnutrition, it's under, and overnutrition is still a growing issue. One of the proved solution across the world, both for the developed and developing countries, would be the school meal programs, that where the countries support especially for the elementary or secondary school, the provision of the health diets to all the students that are enrolled. It all brings all the different questions and cross-sectoral collaboration between the ministries of education, the Ministry of Health, the infrastructure, the agriculture, the farmers, so all the different actors together that will that have to be involved in the program. Not only it will bring the development benefits for the children that will be fit for the better life in future, but it also will ensure that the economic and employment opportunities are provided for the farmers. But it requires also enabling environment, incentives, financing, support, and as in case of the public spending, a very stringent control over the expenditures. The third part is the global processes, and here I would like, and I will share it also in the link, that as a follow-up of in preparation of the UN Food System Summit in 2021, the countries convened a number of national dialogues to bring all the different actors together and to bring this systemic and integrated approach into action. As a result, more than 100 countries issued their national food system transformation pathway that has a system and network of the national conveners that are specifically tasked to bring this intersectoral and multidisciplinary collaboration together and to bring across the sectors for the much better and accelerated food system transformation. The stock taking that took place last year actually highlighted some of the progresses and some of the the other elements of where we are still lagging behind. But it's a good and excellent go-to place to see what has worked in the countries. And that brings me to the last point for this intervention is the in preparation for the high-level political forum, and specifically on SDG 2, FAO, together with our other UN agencies, convened an expert group meeting where we brought the experts from all the different sectors, regions, representing different groups, from parliament to the ministers, to the academia, farmers, youth, so trying to be as inclusive as possible, not only to take stock of what has happened in terms of the SDG 2 and all the indicators, but how we can develop the solutions that can accelerate it not only in one SDG, but across all the dimensions of sustainable development. As a result of this expert group meeting, it goes now to New York, where the findings will be presented. But a very comprehensive report was produced with a very tangible, very actionable policy recommendations that can be of use for the lawmaking or for the accountability or for prioritizing agri-food system transformation as the win-win-win solution for the countries. And for that, I think that what we can bring together is that what is needed is the comprehensive, integrated, collaborative approach that will bring right to food, addressing those who are vulnerable or who are deprived from their rights, where we need the challenges that our countries are facing now. They are complex and they are integrated. Therefore, the response has to be integrated. So basically, to bring all the different actors together, but with the sufficient, robust legal frameworks, accountability, financing, and the action and the behavioral change that would be required from the whole of society. With that, I stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia, and we really appreciate your global update, the highlight of the links to some global UN processes that are looking at the global progress, also on other SDGs, including this year's high-level political forum in New York. I think it would be very useful if you could share in the chat the link to the comprehensive report that you have just referred to. Oh, I can see that you have just done it. I think this could be very useful for the parliamentarians who are online. And with this, I'd like to turn to our next panelist, Ms. Sherry Atilano. And I would like to ask her to introduce herself, as well as maybe say 2 words about Agrea, so that colleagues know what perspective you bring to this discussion. Over to you, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dimitri. Thank you, ESCAP, IPU, and UNICEF for inviting me. Hope I'm clear and you can hear me okay. Yeah, so Agrea is actually an innovative agribusiness starting in the Philippines, and we are working with around 37,000 smallholder farmers, and we're connecting them to the market in terms of workforce nutrition and sustainability. Second one, we also work a lot with the government for policy influencing on how to redesign budgets in national governments and local governments in terms of accessing farmer support, at the same time reallocation on where should the support to transform the food. The first topic on securing food for all. I think because we work with smallholder farmers and that's our expertise, and learning a lot from all the food systems transformation series of trainings and talks, including the launch in Italy in 2021, there's a whole lot of work that we need to do. And I always believe that if we go back to the basic and working it all from the ground, it's really about one, empowering our smallholder farmers on how we can support them to better transition to this food systems transformation. It is because it's not anymore agriculture, it's not anymore production. We're accountable to the environment, we're accountable to climate changes, but more than that, we're accountable to the demand of sustainability in the food value chain and also the consumers. So what we do in our company in terms of focusing on the smallholder farmers, we work with the largest companies in the Philippines, multinational companies that are actually working on subsidizing the food of their workforce. So we call it workforce nutrition. Philippines is a call center or a business process outsourcing capital in Southeast Asia. So every day we feed 60,000 people daily with nutritious food. And these are the workforce of the Filipinos, and each of this workforce member is actually feeding 5 members of the family to have access to greater food. So in this business, we actually collaborate with Sodexo as the largest catering company in the Philippines. And how does it work? For me, when we're working with the smallholder farmers, it's not enough to teach them to transition to sustainability without an assured market. No one will bite that formula. If the farmers has no secured market, they will not go for. So what we have been doing in our workforce nutrition, so because we know how much people we feed every day, so last year, together with Sodexo, we actually produced 8.5 million healthy meals for the workforce. In the process, the workforce have less absenteeism, they're becoming healthier, they're becoming good breadwinners of their family, and their family have better access to food. In another angle of that, we were able to help 37,000 smallholder farmers in the Philippines. And it wasn't easy because the farmers are so aggregated, so we need to do clustering of farmers. Because if we will not cluster the farmers with 1 acre of land or 2 acres of land, we will not reach economies of scale. So it was like a lot of work on integrating the farmers in clustering. So giving you a little bit of background, Philippines is an agrarian reformed country. So most of our farmers are really like tilling very small plot of land. So with this clustering, we were able to make the farmers viable for business. We were able to support the farmers in terms of their rights to have access to government support and also to have voices in designing programs together with the local government, also mandates from the Department of Agriculture, even including the Department of Environment. So what have we been teaching with these farmers? It's because we have a sure market, we can actually transition the farmers to sustainable agriculture. And right now, our goal is to transition them to regenerative farming systems, where we need to really, become not carbon negative, but at the same time, biodiversity positive. What do I mean with carbon negative? So when we transition the farmers to carbon negative, we lessen the carbon footprint. So the farmers, we know how much they need to plant to sustain feeding 60,000 people daily, and it's growing in numbers every quarter. And then second one, we manage food loss and food waste. It's because it's an insightful business concept. You know how much you need to produce. We plow it back to the farmers. We help them plan their production. We also help them with logistics. So in that way, you manage food loss from the farm to our kitchens, managed by Sodexo. And in that manner, we also work with chefs. So we work with 27 chefs and 7 nutritionists to really design menu, we call it menu engineering, that are healthier, minimum of 2 vegetables per meal, and based on seasonality. So the chefs meet the farmers to design this menu. And then second one is managing food waste from the kitchen to the consumers. So even all the food of the consumers, they love it, especially that a lot of these people are young people who they want to be involved in sustainability efforts. So a lot of our work in the kitchens are actually very little kitchen waste, and we utilize everything properly. Another point that I want to add in accessing all of this, healthy diets for all in an equitable manner is really working with women in the food value chain. Women, SDG 5, gender equality is incredible. Women is such a force for good in terms of changing the food systems. My company survived during the pandemic because of the women in the food value chain. When there was a lockdown, the women went out of the streets and really made sure that they could sell the produce of their farmers, their husbands. So in that sense, we actually have a huge program in the Philippines. We call it Forward, finding opportunities and roles of women as a center and the core in making an effort towards agricultural and resilient development. So what we have been doing is, Philippines is an archipelago. We have 7,000 plus islands. So currently we are present in 45 local government units, strengthening the Women Food Producers Association. Why women are very important? First, microfinance, they're the number 1 best payers in microfinance. Second one, they are the ones preparing food on their table and really making sure there's money well budgeted at home. And then third one, the women are really doing it right in terms of managing the farm business, and they're very, very good in post-harvest processing as well as the logistics. My last point in all of this that we're doing, it makes the farming cooperatives or clusters of farmers viable for financial institutions. And we also make the farmers create social accountability so that they can harmonize their efforts to the local government to influence policy making. So currently, we have 80 civil society organizations or group of farmers and fishers that are working in a participatory approach together with the local government units on where the funding should go, where the farm to market road should go, where the efforts of addressing food security and malnutrition should go. So the approach now is bottom-up, together with harmonization with the local government and civil society organizations, with the guidance of other private sector as well as international NGO on making that happen. So I think that's my contribution, and I also give another insights on the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very practical, very inspirational set of examples from real life, affecting real people, and then what you highlighted about linking sustainability with marketability, about being carbon negative, but also biodiversity positive, and finally enhancing the role of women, I think are very clear takeaways that could be guidance for designing a very practical approach to a sustainable agri-food system that links to market and that is brought to scale. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Now we come to Honorable Mr. William, the President of the IPU Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, for his reflections. And then after this, I will open the floor for comments and questions from our distinguished participants. We will have a second part on financing, but I think this is the core discussion now. Then we discuss, then we talk financing, and then we close. Mr. William, over to you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Good afternoon. I will say hi to the Secretary General of SG, of IPU, and all protocol observed. My contribution is that parliamentarians can use different approaches to address agri-food system challenges in the context of climate change. Their representation mandate empower them to ensure that agri-food systems are resilient, more efficient, and minimizing waste, and as well as carbon footprint reduction. Parliaments are encouraged to domesticate recommendations adopted in global fora geared towards agri-food transformation. Example, in the COP28 declaration on sustainable agriculture, resilient food systems, and climate actions, calling further maximization of climate and the environmental benefits while containing and reducing harmful impacts. Parliaments can lead by passing appropriate laws that control negative impacts on biodiversity through capacity building, training, and the use of innovative technology, ensuring also the right adaptation and mitigation projects to sustain agri-food system development. Parliamentary committees with specific focus on food security and sustainable development can assist to ensure progress and budgetary allocations. A resolution was recently adopted during the 148th IPU General Assembly entitled Partnerships for Climate Action, Promoting Access to Affordable Green Energy and Ensuring Innovative, Responsible, and Equity, calling for parliamentarians to ensure that best practices is followed in agricultural development projects, which do not further contribute to carbon and methane emissions. However, despite these efforts by parliamentarians, the disparities and differences in resources and capacities to effectively transform the agri-food systems nationally require a review of the global financial systems and access to affordable means. There is a need also to have a global discussion and review on the issue of sovereign technical barriers and the fundamental rights pro-responsibility to a much fairer global approaches to achieving the sustainable development goals. As a level playing field, we all know, is still a complex mission with diverse expectations rather than common grounds because of our natural existential status quo. For example, our plea to have the GDP per capita rating to be reviewed and to factor in the multidimensional vulnerability index to make it fairer to very vulnerable countries to cope, such as seeds and the least developed countries. I thank you.
Thank you very much for this very specific focus on the role of parliaments, what can be done. It's an action agenda of sorts that I think we take to heart, and I hope that this is something that can inspire action and be guiding our discussion also in the next 30-40 minutes remaining in the time of the webinar. With this, distinguished participants, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to ask your questions, make a comment, and share your perspectives. And first of all, let me ask distinguished members of parliament to come in with any questions to our speakers or any reflections on what they have heard or on the topic more generally. Please. I think we've heard a number of really interesting global perspectives. We've heard several good examples from the field, and you've asked for replicable models of action. We heard about it. Then we received a very clear, structured overview of what role the parliaments can play in this regard, and we'd like to hear from you now. The floor is open. You can either take the floor by raising your hand or write your question in the chat, please.
Mr. Dimitri, can I?
Please.
My name is Syed Tariq. I'm a member of National Assembly from Pakistan, sir. Thank you for having us over and for this meeting. I agree with you all, and Mr. Williams had a lot of practical and very good things to say about agri-food system. I particularly see also the fact that I am a parliamentarian member of National Assembly, but also a farmer myself. So I sort of represent both sides. I hope, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we do. Please go ahead.
Okay. Biggest challenge that we are facing right now as a farmer, I can tell you, is the climate change and water scarcity. And with the changing weather, I think we need a lot of research on seeds, because the old seeds or the seeds that we've been using over time, with climate change, I think they are becoming less and less effective, and also more sort of vulnerable to pest attacks. So I personally, we are going through budget time. It is June, and we are starting the new year, with financial year, and we are in the process of budget as we speak right now. I just took a few minutes out to come and attend this meeting because I thought this was really important. And I've been trying my level best. Inshallah, we are trying to put more and more allotment of funds for the research of seed in all of our provinces. I feel that that is the most important thing that we can do for this sector, because with time I see that there's a scarcity of water, like I already mentioned, and we need more climate resilient seeds. So I just wanted to make a comment that if we can all put our heads together and we could create, if there is a possibility of creating a center where we can sort of work on more newer, better seeds that are more prone to, or less prone to pest attacks, and probably come up with better yields, because this world needs more food. And like you said, we need proper directional, we need to give a direction to the farmers also. So I just wanted to make that comment, and also a request that if there is a way we can work together to do research, and if there is a way to put that research together so that we all can benefit from that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much to Honorable Member of Parliament from Pakistan. Indeed, a very important topic, a very important proposal. Let me see if there are other questions or comments, and I'm sure that our panelists, potentially Natalia from FAO, can also comment on that. But
well,
I must...
if I may, I am from Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, unfortunately, my video, Zoom is not allowed for my video. Anyway, but you are hearing me quite well. Thank you, Dimitri. Indeed, it is great honor for me to participate in such kind of the platform, which is, I think, also important, particularly in this period of time. And also would like to thank IPU and all other organizations who are really let me say, organized and put great efforts to make it happen. In Azerbaijan, actually, so in Parliament, we have the special committee, which is called Agriculture Policy Committee, and some of the members of Parliament dealing with this issue in Parliament and trying just to make law appropriately to this time. And also, I would like to say that, particularly right now for Azerbaijan, one of the challenging issue in agriculture sectors, this is the supplying of the water. But government of Azerbaijan trying to do the best to coordinate this issue. And I believe that with the effort of Azerbaijan government and the particular Minister of Agriculture, so problems which it seems for us quietly problematic in water area will be done perfectly. Also, just I would like to say that this is quietly interesting platform, and it is first time for me, to take part, participate in such kind of event. But I would like to wish all success to all participants and particularly to organizers. And I guess next time we will have chance to meet each other and to continue our negotiations and discussions. Thank you very much for giving me this chance, and thank you for inviting me to this event. All the best to you.
Thank you very much for distinguished member of parliament from Azerbaijan. I'd like now to give the floor to the member of parliament from Armenia, please. Ms. Vardanyan, the floor is yours.
Oui, bonjour. Bonjour, je vais m'exprimer en français.
Well, good morning. I'll speak in French.
Merci.
So thank you so much. I'd like to thank the organizers for this event. I appreciate very much this opportunity. I do not want to focus on the problem of my countries only. I would rather discuss a more global approach that is of interest to me, and I hope that the panelists will be able to give their opinion. Is there a systemic approach, a global approach concerning food waste? So you have in some regions of the world shops where there is plenty of food, and in other parts of the world people cannot have access to food. So that's really a very critical problem to my mind. And then a second point I'd like to mention is that the executive secretary has referred to conflicts in her intervention, and I would like to underline the negative influence of armed conflicts on food safety, food security, and you know that there is a strong connection between those conflicts and food. And so peace can play a very important role in the right to food, because wars have a disastrous effect not only on food security, but also on populations, on the economy, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for highlighting these important topics. I'd like to just double check with the team if anybody else is asking for the floor. I see a question from the National Assembly from Serbia. It's a question addressed to our panelists on the advice how to start and finance the programs on healthy school meals, a very important aspect of the problem we're discussing. If there are no further requests for the floor or questions, I'd like to ask our panelists that they, for now, take note of the questions received, and that we address those very concrete questions in the second round, when I give you the floor in the second round of the panel, just in the interest of time. Before doing that, though, I'd like to ask Ms. Alexandra Blagojevic, the Program Manager for International Development at IPU, to say a few words on IPU's work and how IPU can support the parliaments and the parliamentarians in addressing this important issue. Ms. Blagojevic, you have the floor for literally 3 minutes, please, and then we'll go to the second part of our discussion, where we will cover issues of financing and collaboration, and we'll address the questions that we have received from the audience. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present the IPU's work. It's a really fascinating discussion here, and we are taking good note of these very real needs from the field. We would be very happy to also see later on with the FAO and other partners about how we could jointly address them and help parliamentarians address them. A couple of years ago, we published with FAO, the Sun Movement, and other partners a handbook on the role of parliament in securing nutrition and food safety. So this really goes along the lines of the collaboration that is already in place. A lot has been said here about the link of climate change with climate change and agri-food systems, and climate change is an area of IP where IPU is putting a lot of effort. We are assisting parliaments in developing different kinds of legislation. It can be from assistance to framework laws on climate change or some specific issues related to climate change. For example, last year we assisted the Parliament of Benin in adopting a law on waste management. We are currently working with the Parliament of Thailand with helping them with a law on climate change and air pollution. We also are looking at linkages between health, nutrition, and climate change. Again, we are talking about food security here. This is an area which we would like to develop further. So we would be really keen to, again, discuss with partners about how we can work together in support of parliamentary work. More generally, on the SDG engagement, we assist parliaments in developing the best way to engage across SDGs. And we are doing that through a self-assessment methodology. We have worked with many parliaments in this regard, and we would be happy also to help you provide more information if this is of interest to you to advance the work in your parliament on SDGs as a whole. I would just like to conclude by saying that we are hoping to discuss these and other issues at the parliamentary meeting at the COP29 on climate change in Azerbaijan at the end of the year. And we really hope that many of you will attend that meeting as well or contribute to its organization throughout the time. I will put in the chat my email. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you would like more information about IPU support to Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for this quick, concrete update. And again, thanks for sharing your contacts in the chat. Now I turn back to our panel. We have heard from a number of members of Parliament. You can see that the question that we have foreseen on the link between the climate agenda and agri-food systems, on the importance of creating funding models, have been already mentioned, specifically, for example, the financing of the school nutrition programs. But also you heard the questions about water scarcity, specifically, and about the importance of tackling food waste. So I'd like to ask our panelists to very briefly reflect on the climate and agri-food link, to reflect on the systemic approach to creating jobs, and of course, to reflect on the financing and funding issues, and what the role of Parliament is in this regard, both addressing the questions that were in the program and the questions that you received from the distinguished members of Parliament. And we will follow the same order, starting with Natalia. And then, dear distinguished participants, we will take note of all your hands, and we will give you the floor after the panel for a final round of questions and reactions. Natalia, a few minutes only, please.
Yes, I will be short. It's a very, very important kind of two questions combined, two issues or challenges: agri-food system and climate change. And I think that in the beginning we heard from the declaration, the UA declaration on food systems, agriculture, and climate action was adopted last November. Now, as a spin-off from that, the UN Food System Coordination Hub that is hosted by FAO, actually they are our neighbors, is launching a convergence initiative. And convergence initiative is how to bring the food system transformation and climate action together. So the work on the national pathways, all the legislative work and implementation of all the strategies should be coordinated with the work of the countries on NDCs, on NAPs, and all the climate action areas. How to bring these discussions? It's kind of especially from the perspective that they are still done by different sectors, different ministries, and the different actors. The second one is that FAO has launched, and this is a very, very practical, you ask for the practical steps. FAO has launched a roadmap to 1.5 to SDG 2 within 1.5 degrees. It has 20 policy areas with the very specific actions in the very specific sectors. Is it livestock? Is it fishery? Is it the crop production? What can be done to decrease, first of all, the emissions, but also to adapt to the climate change more kind of in terms of the water and the other elements. And the last one is that, unfortunately, although agri-food system is responsible for the 30% of greenhouse gas emissions and is the most affected by climate change sector, only 4% of climate finance goes to agri-food system. So it's also how how the world architecture of financing climate action initiatives programs massive is done, and it's not prominently supporting the transformation at scale that is needed to transform the food systems within to limit its climate impact, but also to adapt and continue feeding the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clear. Sherry, over to you.
Thank you so much. I would like to add on the financing issues. I think there are so many hesitations on financing the transition to, and the transformation of the food systems. It's because it's so risky, especially with the climate shocks and the crisis that we're experiencing. Currently, I'm actually trying to help in some organizations in Asia on how to do blended financing, where the risks are covered by development funds, because sometimes investors and private financial institutions are just hesitant to immediately fund food producers and even people in the food value chain. So there are just some risks that they are not, they don't have, the appetite to cover. So I think a blended financing that is being worked out now in Asia is something that we could think about in terms of, policy making for government, as well as not making sure that the private sector that are in food value chain are actually included in the process, because they need to change. They need to invest in the food systems transformation. Another one is it needs to be supported by policy making, because if we need to transition for food and most of the private sectors are the one facing the consumers, and if there's no strong policy coming from parliamentarians or different governments supporting that effort of transition, it will be difficult to happen, because most of the private sector actually governed in terms of their ESG compliance to transition into the food systems. And another one is to really pay attention on paying the externalities of producing food. We should not produce food that is cheap, because when you produce food that is cheap, it's not healthy food. So we really need to make sure that externalities on food, producing food vis-a-vis the cost of environment is covered. It's because if not, the farmers are the ones suffering. And their environment is suffering. When their environment is compromised, they couldn't support the growth of production and the demand of this sustainable transition. Lastly is collaboration, because we're really working on we need to work on a multidimensional, multi-sectoral approach. So as much as possible, the transition, I was so involved in the UN food systems transformation since its conception, and I happen to be the advisor of our Filipino president and the Department of Agriculture and different ministries involved. What we're doing right now is producing food is not only a responsibility of the Department of Agriculture or the Ministry of Agriculture. It's a responsibility of everybody. It's a responsibility of the Department of Health, Education, especially school meals is there. It's a responsibility of social welfare, where social protection is something that is also, we need to rethink on how to use social protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you touched upon a number of important issues. I will not repeat them now, but I will try to summarize at the very end. I'd like to now turn to our third panelist. Mr. William, please.
Thank you, Dimitri. I mean, it looks like Cherry Atilano has touched on all the points that I would like to to raise, but I would like just to say that, put emphasis on the roles of members of parliament. I mean, they have to know the policies. They have to know the policies and strategies being implemented, and also to look at the sets of laws governing all the policies, backing the policies, to see where there are things that can be improved on, because it's the members of parliament who are responsible to ensure that the interests of the national interest in terms of food security is being targeted and safeguarded. So I would like to say that members of parliament should be, attuned and connected to what is really happening on the ground in terms of knowing exactly what is happening in the environment, because it's our environment that is sustaining us. So there is a need for parliamentarians to be connected with what is happening nationally in the field of food security and sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a very clear message. And I think today's webinar has already helped us take a step forward in this direction. The presentations themselves, the very valuable resources shared in the chat, the examples that we heard about, all point to first of all, a significant potential for parliaments to take action and to influence this very complex multi-SDG issue. I would like to emphasize the point that was made by several speakers. This is not just about SDG 2. Secondly, there is a wealth of experience. There are many proven models, and what you see in the chat, I think some really good examples of both research efforts, but also coordination and action efforts, as well as, reports that point to the challenges and the gaps. So we already know what we don't know, and what the challenges are, and I think it will be our collective task to move forward on this. Before we close, I'd like to offer the opportunity to the distinguished participants to take the floor and react, reflect, ask questions. I saw a hand from the Member of Parliament from Benin. Mr. Edmonde, would you like to take the floor? Giving it a few seconds to make sure that translation also works here. Okay. If it's not the case, the floor is open for any questions, reactions, or reflections. Alexandra, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just following in the chat the conversation about school meals and workforce meals. I have to admit that personally, I don't know much about this, and I'm wondering if those who participated in this conversation could provide some more information. I see the question was started by somebody from the National Assembly of Serbia, and then a colleague from the FAO provided some very useful resources. So if you can just in a few minutes tell us a little bit more about that, I would find it very useful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Would the representatives of the National Assembly of Serbia like to take the floor to share their perspective on this issue, or ask the question in more detailed way? Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, for me, it was just insightful, the suggestions that the speakers made. And I was just starting to think as a member of parliament what we can do here to maybe assure more market for our farmers, specifically farmers that have less possibility and less space on the current market. And was just thinking who would be the one who is if we are initiating this program, who would be the one to provide the finances? Probably the government will participate in some part, but again, I was just curious how it was done in these two specific examples. Actually, the suggestion number one with the food meals for the schools, and the second one for the actual example that was done by our colleagues from Philippines. I hope I explained enough.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tamatovic, for your question, for your clarification. Before we turn back to the panel for the final round, I'd like to give the floor to the Member of Parliament from Benin. Mr. Edmondo, you have the floor. Please go ahead. We cannot hear you, unfortunately. No sound that I can hear. I don't know if others can hear it. Okay, we apologize for this technical difficulty. I don't think we have any possibility to solve this now. If Benin would like to come in later, we will try to make space, but we have only a few minutes left till the end of the meeting. So I'd like to first turn to our distinguished participants to see if anybody else would like to take the floor. Okay. This does not seem to be the case.
Good evening, good morning.
So I'd like to turn now to Natalia and Sherry. You've heard a few more reflections and questions, maybe quick feedback from your side, and then we will be closing the event. Natalia, please.
A very quick one, and thank you very much for my representative from Serbia for the question. So the starting point will be, of course, the World Food Program. This is within UN family, the agency that has the most experience in terms of the actually implemented programs across the world, but also collection of the what worked and how. And of course, through the Food School Meals Coalition, which is bringing the best examples, for example, from Mexico, from Brazil. So it was a comprehensive, not only educational and nutrition kind of improvement program, but improving the livelihoods of the farmers around the cities, but connected also to urban development, so the urban food systems, and actually thinking how the cities will be developed and what is needed from that perspective as well. From the so that would be the goal, the starting point, and of course the Food School Meal Coalition is the way to bring the member states, the governments, the parliaments together and to discuss and actually to see what worked and where the resources can be leveraged from.
Thank you. Sherry?
Thank you very much from the member of the parliament in Serbia for your question. So the one that we're working in the government, right, on of course, we're also working the school meals because the country signed up for that, is to really closing the loop of how the smallholder farmers can be included in the feeding program for the children at schools, especially in the Philippines, where most of the children are going to school hungry and malnourished. And if we compromise their cognitive development, from a child, and now we're just actually saving them because we need to invest in their cognitive development in the first 1,000 days. The school meals is just saving them on the next phase of a child. So right now, but closing the loop, how policies could support it, how even social protection can be restructured to work hand in hand with the Department of Education to fund it, and how to work with the local government units where the schools are present together with the farmers that they're working with. Hope I give clarity on your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, For me, it's been a fascinating experience to really have a mixed perspectives, to take a global look, but then also zoom in on practice, to hear from international organizations and practitioners, to hear the members of parliament express their real needs and their real expectations, be it on climate resilient seeds or the need to address water scarcity or the school feeding programs as an emerging priority. I have just one small remark that to the honorable member of parliament from Azerbaijan, that at the UNECE, we will be delighted to follow up with you on the issue of water scarcity and food security. Our water team is working very actively on this topic, also as part of the outreach and capacity building of the Water Convention that we host. But perhaps it merits a separate conversation. There are a number of events in this space that we also are planning with FAO, including potentially at COP29 in Baku. So we will be very happy to follow up with you and ensure that there is a parliamentary track in this. I would also like to note that the topic of climate and food systems is gaining prominence, and we would, and this is for me one of the key takeaways, we would need parliaments to take a more active role. There needs to be built up capacity on generally, for example, oversight of NDCs and NAPs from the parliamentary side, but specifically on this highly politically and socially relevant aspect of NDCs and NAPs, agri-food systems. The fact that only 4% of climate finance currently goes to agri-food is, for me, a striking realization. So the second takeaway is that there needs to be an overview, if you wish, a compendium of practical models of financing, both when it comes to models of funding from national budgets, but also blended finance and leveraging private sector finance there. I think some of the examples we heard where a major catering company is involved in the scaling up phase is the direction in which we need to be thinking. But I'm quite sure that through the research and convening power of both IPU and FAO, we could perhaps actually have a practical zoom in on this issue and see what other models of financing are there. We heard some of them today. Finally, the points that were very clearly made by the Secretary General of IPU and the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, the need for cross-sectoral coordination and understanding that agri-food systems addressing food security, addressing malnutrition and obesity at the same time require a very strong multi-agency and multi-partner perspective. That means parliaments with their global country-wide look at things can play a big role. They can demand that different ministries come together. They can demand that private sector representatives are brought around the table. They can demand a focus on quality and not just the price, because it's also the role of parliaments to set procurement rules through legislation and oversight. And in this particular instance, approach to procurement, for example, can be a make it or break it in such areas as school nutrition, school feeding. We've seen cases around the region where using the procure at the lowest price principle, unfortunately, kids in schools were getting foods that were substandard at best and probably harmful to their health and their long-term development outcomes. So how can parliaments address this issue? It's a systemic governance issue that requires attention, and I think there are good experiences around the world, and we can perhaps bring WFP into this conversation to address it. But there are many other examples of the cross-sectoral action. In this case, the example of school feeding is education, is finance, is agriculture. There are many other good examples where cross-sectoral action across SDGs is necessary. So we would like to thank you all for your active participation. We'd like to take note of the outcomes of this event and the questions received, also for the work going on in the United Nations, including at the high-level political forum. We would like to make sure that parliaments are empowered and capacitated to take this work forward. And in this regard, from UNECE, UN ESCAP, I'm pleased to confirm that we will be very happy to work with IPU on the practical steps in this regard as well. Distinguished members of parliament, dear colleagues, before closing, I'd like to ask you to respond to a quick online evaluation poll that the team will project now. Please, a quick poll using the same technique with the Mentimeter. We'd like to hear your feedback. Was it useful? Was it something that you expected? And of course, any other additional comments and suggestions that you might have. You see the QR code, so please scan it with your phone. Okay, and let's maybe look at the results, if we have them. Not yet, right? All right, we're getting some responses. Thank you very much for this feedback. All right. Well, then, dear distinguished colleagues, it's my great pleasure to close the webinar. I'd like to very much thank the team of IPU. First and foremost, the Secretary General for him leading the way and ensuring we have this space for dialogue and supporting this approach of working across organizations. So thank you very much, Secretary General, but also the whole IPU team. And I know that Isabel and colleagues have invested a lot of work into this, but also the team of ESCAP and UNICE that have been part of organizing this event. It's been my pleasure to moderate it, and we look forward to staying in touch. Please stay tuned for the next editions. This has become a nice annual tradition, and we hope that we will continue with further webinars on various sustainable development goals going forward as well. Thank you very much, and wishing you all a very nice day.